Howdy, Hacksters! Welcome to Tuesday. It's my favorite day of the week. We get to talk to someone who's doing really cool stuff with hardware. And this week, we have Zach Supalla. We haven't actually had you on the show before, which is funny because I think Particle might have been the first company to work with Hackster back in the day when you were Spark and we didn't have a logo. How's it going?
I'm good. I'm very excited to be here. And yeah, we've been doing stuff together for long enough that I don't think we were called Particle yet. In those
No,
very early
yeah.
days, we were
I think
still Spark. So yeah,
I remember the Spark core being very excited about. I think they were like white back in the day.
they were white, which means my first advice to anybody doing electronics is do not make white circuit boards. You will deeply regret it.
How
Which is
come?
why they're black now, because they turn pink.
Oh,
Um, if you want pink circuit boards, you can totally do pink circuit boards, but keeping them white is very hard.
that's really interesting. I've actually got like a pink Arduino back there that has like a Renaissance chip on it from way back in the day. But that's if you intentionally want one. But if not, then maybe not.
Yeah, they turn
So,
more like they turn like sunburnt, like not a nice
ooh,
pink, like a yeah.
good to
So
know.
now we do black circuit boards.
Pro tips. All right, so you're here today partly in honor of a new thing that you've just released. What's going on at
Yeah.
Particle?
Yeah. So we announced a new portfolio of devices called the MSeries, and the M stands for multi-radio. So the whole shtick is, we've had customers building IoT devices with Particle forever. We originally started with Wi-Fi connected devices. We added cellular a couple of years later. Those have been kind of our big radio technologies, and both are great. They solve different problems, but the big thing that folks are always looking for is like, what's the radio that works everywhere? And so the reality is there isn't any one radio that works everywhere. Cellular is like the closest you're going to get, and it works most places, but not everywhere. And so to
Mm.
get to everywhere, we need to mix radios together. And so our M series multi-radio products have Wi-Fi, cellular, satellite, and LoRaWAN, and all integrated into a package. We have SOMs, so modules that are designed for putting into products. We have development boards, a new development board called the Muon, and then those can go inside an enclosure into a gateway, into Monitor One, which is our industrial equipment gateway. So we just
Cool.
announced it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of these things. We've got your announcement here, and here
Mm-hmm.
you can see
Mm-hmm.
all three of these things. So the thing on the left, yeah, I didn't catch the announcement for the Monitor One, and this is an industrial gateway.
Yes. So what's the backstory to this product? So Particle has a bunch of customers who use our stuff to deliver product to market. 70% of the time, the form that product takes is a box with a cable sticking out of it,
Right.
which leads to the question of like, well, why does everybody keep making their own box? And the problem is that there is a whole market of industrial equipment gateways of some kind, like boxes with cables, but they generally don't meet the requirements of the customer because they don't have like the right electronics in them. And so we saw an opportunity to make that easier, by essentially taking like the development board, so the Muon, and which has an expansion card interface, kind of like a Raspberry Pi hat or an Arduino Shield, and we built it into a gateway so that you can put your own sensors on the electronics and then put it inside a industrial grade waterproof enclosure that's designed to be mounted to a pole or a rail or the side of a piece of equipment or whatever. And you can very quickly go from that prototype into something that is, robust and ready to ship to customers.
Super cool. And you've got the design files for that on GitHub.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
You also mentioned the expansion card. This is something that's pretty cool, making it possible for people, like an open standard, like you mentioned, like the Raspberry Pi hat or the Arduino Shield, so that people can design their own boards to mount particle devices to. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the up until the M series, if you look back at sort of prior products we've had, we have development boards and we have SOMs. And we've designed them to be, the development board is designed to be easy for prototyping. And the SOM is the system on module. The module is designed to be easy for embedding into a product. And they're very similar. So there's always this sort of parallel path where you say you can easily transition from the development board into the SOM, but they are not electrically identical. And that's because, like the Boron, for instance, which is our cellular development kit, is a feather form factor development kit. It's very small. And so that means it has to be a little bit different than the BSOM, which is the M2 form factor module. And so with this generation, what we decided to do is make it one thing where the Muon is really a carrier board for the MSOM. And so you take the MSOM, you put it on the development board, which is similar in design to like, Arduino Raspberry Pi. You sort of expose things with the female headers on the board. Surprisingly small, and I wish I had one in my hand because they look on a screenshot like the same size as an Arduino Raspberry Pi. It's about the size of a credit card. So
Wow.
it's small, which is good because it makes it a little easier to design into a product. That's our friend Mohit's hand, and Mohit has regular sized hands, so that gives you a sense for. He doesn't have like monster hands to make the products look extra small. So then the headers are exposed with. We'll be publishing the pinout, so folks can make expansion cards that are designed to work with all of these different development boards and work inside Monitor One as a enclosed gateway kind of a product.
So many pins on here. What kind of GPIOs do you have?
Oh, there's a boatload. The microcontroller reuse has a lot of stuff, lots of peripherals, and so lots of stuff that is exposed. It's also got a quick connector, so it works with that whole ecosystem, which is very cool.
This is the SparkFun Quick ecosystem, which is, I think, compatible mostly with Adafruit's. Oh my gosh, Stemma QT. Am I wrong there?
Yep.
Cool. So
a whole world of accessories and sensors and stuff.
Awesome. Now you've got multiple different versions of the Muon. There's kind of this branching situation going on here where you've got like the three things that we're very excited about, the MSOM, the Muon versions, and there's multiple versions of the MSOM as well, and then also the ability to plug those into the Monitor One via expansion cards. And could you tell us about the different the reasons that you have these different versions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that is the most combined product is, and you'll see we have these model numbers, the 635. So it's the one with the blue background there, has LTE-M, which is a low power part of the cellular spec. So it's cellular. It's got 2G backfall, so that makes it work in environments where Cat-M is not deployed. It has satellite, so the technology is called NTN satellites and non-terrestrial networks. Basically, if you're familiar with narrowband IoT, it's basically narrowband, but instead of sending it to a cellular tower, it's sending that message to space. And it has dual band Wi-Fi, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, and then LoRaWAN, which is delivered with a module that has it is designed to be used off the shelf with LoRaWAN, but it is a generic sub-gigahertz radio also. And so that's the thing that has like the most radios in it. That's the most combined product. But we have other versions. If you aren't intending to use the satellite network, then we have one that comes without that, and it's a little cheaper. And if you are deploying primarily in Europe, we also have a Cat 1 version, which is Cat 1 is more widely deployed in Europe. And that one doesn't have the satellite radio because the Cat 1 and for a bunch of silicon reasons, Cat 1 stuff and NTN satellite stuff is generally different silicon, not combined into single products.
Neato. So, I'm such a dork. But you've got multiple different companies that you're working with for. Wait. So I have to stop real quick with the practical questions and just ask. So it's non-terrestrial networks, which I think is a much cooler name for satellite. Has Particle gone to space? Have there been any like products that deployed particle hardware to space?
That is a great question. Uh, I'm not aware of us having gone to space, but I do know that there is a group of people who have done some very cool stuff with growing plants on the
Ooh.
International Space Station that were talking to us about using our development boards, and I didn't follow up and see what they ended up doing. So it is possible we've gone to space. Um, which I feel like when you make the kind of stuff that we make, like, development boards and SOMs and stuff, like, you don't really know what people do with it. You see some of it, but like there's always a bunch of people out there using your stuff for like things you're not aware of. So, I'm going to call, like, there's a 25% odds that we've been to space. But we'll get there if we're not there yet.
So, okay, anyone, if you are sending particle tech to space, definitely let them know because that would be awesome.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about the LoRaWAN. You've got 3 different providers that you're working with, and you actually have
Hmm.
a really cool diagram here. I like so talking about the different protocols and where they sort of fit in this range and power and bandwidth spectrum.
Hmm.
So, could you tell us about the different companies you're working with and why you chose to work with them?
Yeah. So one of the things we've always tried to do is we really want to make stuff easy. And I think it is still the case that when you're talking about wireless radios, most of the time, people who are building wirelessly connected things are sort of expected to know a lot about the wireless networks that they're using, both in terms of how they function, the communication protocols you use, and like how they're actually then going to connect to the backhaul to a server somewhere and stuff like that. And generally speaking, our goal is to try to abstract that and say, look, it's open source and you can dig under the hood and you can see what's going on, but you
Mm.
shouldn't have to kind of work at that level. You should be able to do something that is more abstracted. And in our case, we frame that as like particle.publish. So you have one line of code to send a message, and that'll just show up on the other side at wherever the message is intended to go.
Like magic.
Now, for Wi-Fi, we go back to like sort of through the development of these different radios.
Mm.
For Wi-Fi, what we need to do to make that possible is we need to do the communications protocol work, but mostly we just need to figure out a good way to get it connected to your Wi-Fi network, because you're generally connecting it to your personal network or network on site at wherever the thing is getting deployed. With cellular, we also provide SIM cards and data plans integrated into the platform, and so if you plug in one of our cellular devices, it just lights up and is connected to the other side. And that happens because there is an embedded SIM on the product, what we call Ether SIM, which works with 350 carriers around the world, and it just kind of lights the thing up. So when we looked at adding satellite and LoRaWAN, we wanted to do the same thing. We wanted to um, have it work out of the box and have like whatever the equivalent is of the SIM card on the product. Now, in the case of LoRaWAN, there are a bunch of different LoRaWAN network operators, and they each play a different role, right? Like people approach that market in different ways. And so we decided, rather than having one partner, we wanted to have a few to solve different problems. And so the first one we have is Helium, which is a decentralized network. There are like 350,000 Helium hotspots deployed currently. It's a big network. A lot of basically any like populated area is going to be, you're going to be in range of a Helium hotspot. And so that is something that you can mostly just turn it on and it will connect. The second is the Things Industries, famous for the Things Network and the Things Stack, which is the most popular solution for folks who are kind of building and deploying their own LoRaWAN networks. And so in that context, you can buy one of a bunch of off-the-shelf LoRaWAN gateways. You can plug it in, use the Things Stack as your LoRaWAN network server, and similar outcome, right? Like you just plug it in and it works. But in that case, you're kind of bringing your own gateway. And then the third is Comcast Machine Q. And Machine Q is more of a managed service provider. And so if you want to be able to deploy your own gateways, but you also want to somebody else to be responsible for like managing that network, Machine Q is they have devices in like thousands of like fast, sort of fast food restaurants. And they have a team of people who can actually go on site and install gateways. And so if you have like a customer who is doing this, and you need to like get out there and plug in these gateways and get them connected reliably to the network, how are you going to do that? They provide that as a service. And so three different options that are really good for different kinds of customers that are trying to get things connected in different ways.
Awesome. And people are already building really cool stuff with Particle. So I just got to highlight real quick that you have a very active community on Hackster already. And, you've got people from Particle posting projects. You've got other people like posting smart LARP armor. I love this. Check that out. And then oh, so good. So much creativity. And one of the cool ones that you recently featured on the Particle Twitter was this empowering mangrove conservation with Particle IoT. Adore this. And you can see like they've actually put it in the real world. And this is a wonderful tutorial that really sort of digs in deep, super cool stuff. But going back a little bit to the space theme and like y'all's projects, you have yourselves created a number of really cute, interesting little PCBs and stuff with Particle, and so both officially and unofficially. I was at Maker Faire this year, Maker Faire Bay Area. You had this like little water balloon game that someone on the team had created, and I actually have a little interview that I gotta like edit up and publish. But it's so exciting, and so with all of this, and of course we have to mention Mohit Bohite, who has created tons of these little devices.
Unbelievable, artwork.
Going back to the space theme and stuff, but with all this creativity, how do you foster creativity on the team? Because, at some point with this much sort of proactive activity, you got to be doing something intentional and something right. How do you foster an environment where people are excited to build with it? Or are they just like, does everyone come in as a fanboy or fangirl? Or
we have it's a great question, and I think there's a bunch of different answers to it. We have hired a lot of our engineering team came out of our developer community in some capacity, right? And so we've hired people who were using our stuff, and sometimes they were using it for personal projects and like stuff that they were building at home. We've hired people who were using our products to build other products that they were shipping to customers, maybe building startups that didn't go where they wanted it to, and so they ended up joining our team. And so we've had a bunch of different ways that we have sort of pulled people with natural creativity into the team, right? So I do think it starts with the fact that the kinds of people who show up at Particle and want to work here and that we end up hiring have that creativity inside of them, right? Almost without exception. And then I think that the beyond from there, it sort of becomes like, well, how do we funnel that? Because I think that there are cases where you look at like some of the stuff that Mohit does, an example as with his circuit, with his sculptures, right? Is like extraordinary art, and that is his creativity in its rawest form. That was a entirely personal project that he sort of stood up and we're like, oh my god! I mean, we always knew he was talented, right? But it's so cool to see what he's done with that. Then we sort of look to take some of the creativity from folks in the team and say, how do we funnel this in a way that's going to solve a customer problem? And I think that can happen in ways that are both very practical and useful, but like maybe more boring. And then it can also find its way into places that are a little bit more just like fun, right? And so the practical stuff is like, multi-radio, right? Like we're doing this thing that is very complicated, right? Getting a bunch of radios to work in a way that's seamless for the customer, that's hard. And practically speaking, that means like people are driving around and like trying to figure out where the satellite networks actually work, right? Like, do you have to be outside, or like can you be by a window? And like that means that we have engineers in the team who like build little rigs and then go around and like try them out and are posting videos on Slack of like what worked and what didn't work, right? And that's a lot of the practical work of getting something like that to work. So the creativity all goes into like, how are we going to figure this out? It's just good engineering. And then there's stuff like the snowflake, right, which we created for the holiday season, which was right, just
It's so good.
straight up good old fun, right? And like, you know, stuff like that. I think it is, even though our business is very much about like providing technology for folks who are building real products to solve real problems, and we really love seeing folks who are using us for like methane emissions monitoring, right, to try to
Mm,
save the world with reducing greenhouse gases. Like we do a ton of methane emissions reduction stuff with Particle. That's
nice.
awesome. Also, sometimes you just got to have fun, right? Like I don't think that like fun and creativity are like part of the game. And sometimes that means that we make snowflakes, and like that snowflake doesn't have a reason for being other than like it's fun. And I think for a lot of the people on the team, it was a great project to do something that, like I've got a 6-year-old who doesn't really understand what I do, but I brought him a snowflake and he played with it and was like, "You do stuff like this?" Like, "Yeah, I do stuff like that." "Oh, that's really cool." And that's fun, right? That's part of what makes this stuff worth doing.
Plus, you publish them as reference designs, so a lot of people use these for sort of art purposes. There's all kinds of people who are adapting them to use with cheer lights, for example, the sort
Mm-hmm.
of open source, everyone global synced color lights. I used Particle for this Thinker Blinker collaboration with my friend Mohib, where we would like, I was taking EEG data into a Particle device and then using it to turn on this light bulb remotely. It was like ridiculous.
Oh, that's
But
awesome.
that's, a way that I think that they're very creatively inspiring when you're making it easy for people to make things that are very magical. Honestly, I should pull this up, but there's one project that was like early in the site that became a commercial product, which was these connected touch lamps, like friendship lamps that like
Mm-hmm.
anywhere in the world you'd have these two lamps. You'd have one, your friend would have one, and you'd touch yours and the other one would light up. And it was just like this beautiful, elegant implementation of this concept that a lot of people have come up with, but like just totally gorgeous. And you make it so easy. And by publishing like this reference design for the snowflake, it turns it into this like, oh yeah. And if you're not sure where to get started, you can just start with this. And there's some pretty complex patterns on here and stuff. So you get to learn about programming patterns. You get to learn about, it's got a speaker on it, it's got a microphone on it, it even has like an AI thing, I think, where don't you say like sparkle or something and it lights up in a specific pattern. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. It's got some cool like voice stuff. It's a lot of, I do think that the line between play and creativity and work is in its best form. It's like, that's all shades of gray, right? And yeah, we
Mhm.
can make a snowflake that's for fun and it plays Christmas music, and like, blinks in fun ways. And that can also be a reference design that people can use for, professional grade products because it was well designed, right? And so the design principles on that product are worthy of carrying forward into a product that you're shipping to industrial customers. Like it's all the same, it's all the same stuff.
Yes. Um, let's see. So with IoT devices, um, obviously one huge concern is security. And you've
Mhm.
mentioned in your release article that you've implemented a couple of security measures that you've included on previous projects as well. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How do you
Yeah,
ensure the privacy, the security of people's IoT data?
it's a great question. And I think that this is where, starting from like we're a platform that's designed to be really easy to use for prototyping, but also very robust for deploying, real products to market and products that go into very industrial grade environments, right? Like we
Mm,
have passed some security reviews of some like pretty big companies with a lot of security people, right? And so we have to make both of these things true. And the luckily, you know, despite the fact that it is often the case that like good, easy to use products aren't secure and secure products aren't easy to use, mostly that's just a design challenge, right? Of like, it is entirely possible to accomplish both of these things. Uh, and so in the context of Particle, for instance, like we pride ourselves on like really easy setup, right? So if you get one of these things and you go to setup.particle.io, it's a
Mm.
very fast and easy way to get your device online. And if it's Wi-Fi, it'll connect it to your Wi-Fi network. If it's cellular, connect it to your cellular network. If it's when the multi-radio products will sort of like go through the, you know, the smoothest path to get to the network. That process, that setup process, is also establishing security, right? And some of that security happens out of the box. On our manufacturing line, we provision our devices to our cloud service, and so there is already a secure link between the devices and cloud services before it even shows up in your hands. But then when you get it, we have to associate that to you, right? Because we're establishing a secure connection not just to the cloud service, but to your account, and saying,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Alex, your device is yours, and that means that as soon as you set it up, it should not be accessible by another person who also has a Particle account. That just happens, right? So when you set up the device, it gets associated with your account. You didn't. There was no like security button that you hit along the way. But what we were doing was establishing that so all the communications are encrypted, and like that just sort of works out of the box. Now we're starting to add new capabilities. So we have a new feature of device protection, which then can increase the security of the device by disabling the ability to sort of reprogram it locally over the wire and things like that. And so this is where you do start to get into a little bit of the like openness versus protection. There is a trade-off here, right? Where like when you're doing early development, you say like, oh, I just want to be able to like, yes, I can do an over-the-air software update. I also want to just be able to like plug in USB or JTAG or whatever and like program it locally. And that's great for early development. And then at some point you're like, well, now I'm shipping the product to customers and I still want to be able to update it. But I don't just want anybody to be able to like plug in to USB and reprogram that, right? Because now that's a thing that has a specific purpose and I don't want it to be hacked. And so you can then turn on protection of that device, which will then disable that that local over the wire programmability. And so those are some of the things we're sort of constantly expanding on security capabilities to make sure we stay on top of like what is the most we can do to make sure our customers' devices are secure, without requiring that they do the work to implement that, and also making it still very easy to use, and not creating pain for the customers.
Hell yeah. So, as you mentioned, you're constantly adding on more security features. Not only that, but like, so you're coming out with these new products. You're coming out with you a few years ago. You started running Particle Spectra, your conference. You've got all this new stuff that you're doing all the time, and for a hardware company, that's really incredible. You've been here since 2012, so 12 years now, which is ridiculous. What would be like at this point? What kinds of people are you looking for? What is your next hire? You mentioned creativity before when we were talking about like you often source people from the developer community. What is Particle looking for in terms of people to grow next?
That's a good question. You know, we have we've been around for a while. We are sort of like, I guess, OGs now at this point, right? We've been doing this thing for 12 years. And I think in the context of IoT, that's like since the beginning, right? IoT existed in different forms, with different names prior to that, like M2M or telemetry, things like that. But like for this phase, we've kind of been around since the beginning. And I think some of the things that we've learned along the way are, I think, really embracing people who are like polyglots, like just like good at a bunch of stuff, right? A lot of our best people are like engineers and artists and like business people, and you know, they do sales and customer success and they do marketing. Like it's all sort of rolled into one. And so you know, our team isn't massive. We've got about 100 people on the team, and I think every person in the company is pretty special, and we really look for people who are just super sharp and super talented and have the skills for the job that we're hiring them for, and also are passionate to, you know, do whatever the company needs and whatever the customers need, and like try to figure out how we all build this thing together.
Yeah. You, in particular, at the top of this, you've been CEO and co-founder again for like 12 years. How do you? I assume that your role has definitely changed over the time, but nonetheless, you clearly have a lot on your plate. Do you have any tips for anyone or any favorite tools that you use to just stay on top of everything and like stay sane, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm definitely like a lists guy. Like I have an endless to-do list, and I think that um, the my job has changed a lot. Absolutely, since we started the business. When we started, it was a Kickstarter campaign, basically, right? Like, and there were three of us, and I was basically doing every job.
Mm.
And over time, uh, the more and more of the jobs that I once did are like done by people who do that full time and are better at that thing than I ever was, right?
Mm.
Um, and that's a natural way that a company progresses, right? Is that like we now have a bunch of people who are really, really good at their jobs. And I think what I have learned about not only myself, but also like how to lead a business like this along the way is like there are a couple things that there have been periods where I sort of was like, I'm the CEO and like everybody else does stuff, and I'm like, my job is to sort of define the vision of the business and articulate that, and everybody else is gonna sort of do the make it happen. And I've sort of pulled back from that and have gotten much more like back into the game with my team. And I think I've done so in a way where I said, what are the things that I actually what are the skills that I have to bring to bear that are unique to me, that are like should be part of my job, right? And
Mm.
it's if I even go back to the Kickstarter days, like the thing that I pride myself in was being able to tell like a really clear story about what we were trying to accomplish with like the first Kickstarter campaign, right? What was the spark core? Like, why did it need to exist? And that storytelling is part of some of it's marketing, right? And like, you know, Kickstarter is such a good forcing function. You have to tell your whole story in a 3-minute video and, basically like a little simple web page that you can't really do very much with. So I was good at telling that story of that product, but
Mm.
also that story ends up becoming the, I guess, if we were talking product management, we'd say like PRD, right? Like the product requirements document
Uh-huh.
is the story, if that makes sense. Like if I can say to a customer, here's what we're doing, and that customer's like, that's what I want, right? We're doing multi-radio. The story of multi-radio is not it is not Wi-Fi plus cellular plus satellite plus LoRaWAN. That's the execution. The story is
Mm.
connect everywhere. The
Right.
story is this is a thing that will connect in any circumstance. That's the product requirements document. That's the thing that the customer wanted, and
Right.
and now we have to deliver on that,
Hmm.
right? And delivering on that is not just about implementing the radios. The product upon its release, when customers start working with it, will probably mostly accomplish that goal, and then we will discover from customers where there's gaps, and then we will add to it and improve upon it, and it will then completely achieve those goals after it has a little bit of good customer feedback. And so that's the stuff that I've sort of kept on as like the stuff that I keep my focus on, because it's a place where I have something to contribute besides just driving the ship. And it's something I love, and is like it's really fun, and yeah.
Yeah, so you mentioned that yeah, this is a huge part of what you do now, and noticed that you're coming from like your previous role was only 3 months at Groupon and like a management consultant in product design, which seems like very relevant to your hardware stuff. But just from Groupon versus like Particle, that's very sort of like virtual software app stuff versus
Mhm.
marketing to developers, and I'm curious what are there like different approaches that you take when you're talking to developers versus like when you're trying to sell like a service to the general public? Obviously, there's going to be some differences there. And what sort of approach do you take in? Because you give these talks at Spectra, for example. You introduced the new hardware and stuff. How do you pitch things differently?
This is a good question. I think that when we started, the idea of selling things to developers, making things the developers loved, and then that developer love would turn into customers we did not create that idea, right? But it was newish in this space, right? Because I think at the time, like, some of my inspiration for this company came from Twilio and Stripe, who were like just taking off at the time that we launched our first Kickstarter campaign. And what they had done that I thought was very clever was they had taken very technically challenging things that are very useful in the context of Twilio. That was basically interacting with telecommunication services. So voice and data, or voice and text messages through APIs. With Stripe, it was credit card processing, right? So you take two different very complicated things and you put them behind an API and you abstract them and you make them easy. And then you say, you probably have a specific concept in mind of what people are going to do with that in the context of Twilio, that's in-app communications with, like the way that you talk to an Uber driver in a text message, like stuff like that, right? And in Stripe, it was really originally like sort of subscriptions billing for SaaS companies, right? But you put it behind an API and you say, well, we know that this thing is useful for this use case, but we also think it's probably useful in other ways. So like, let's just put it behind an API and see what people do with it. And I think that is where this sort of developer, B2B kind of thing really gets interesting, because we don't know what the use cases are for new technology. We have ideas. People do not use cellular the way that I thought people were going to use cellular. We launched cellular in 2015. Like, they do it for the things that we thought they were going to do it for, and then they do it for a whole bunch of other things that were not even on our radar. And so we didn't create this idea, but we were some of the first people to do it in like embedded hardware IoT space, where I think prior to Particle, there was a world of like stuff that's easy to use for developers, like Arduino, Raspberry Pi kind of stuff, and then like professional stuff that is what a professional embedded systems engineer would use, and like there was no overlap between these things. And so I do think we were some of the first folks to say, this can be all one thing, right? Like, we can make things that are easy to use for developers that they love, and also, design for companies. And one of the lessons I've learned from that is I think that people think of developers being like one category and then like enterprises being another category.
Right.
But enterprises aren't people. Those are companies, right? And those companies have people who work for them. And what we have found is that the developers and the people who represent enterprise, right, those are usually the same person. And so it is actually just one story, right? It's one story to one person about how we built how we've created a technology that's, easy to use to solve a problem. And that will make it easy for you as a developer to like go build your thing on top of what we do. And also, when that product goes from being a prototype to being a product in production, we don't just provide the technology, we provide support, we provide services, we provide the platform. And so you're going to have everything you need to deploy that at scale. And you might not use that stuff yet when you're working on your first prototype, but it's there, right? And so that you have a path. And I think that's been, it sounds like multiple stories. It's really just one story to one person who's at the beginning of that journey and is then thinking about, where do I go if this works, right? What is this going to turn into?
Yeah. Legit. So speaking of all that, you've got really incredible documentation. It seems like from the start you've been very documentation forward. That's part of, your being on Hackster, is that like you were showing people how to use the product with lots of different tutorials. So everyone from like a rank beginner to someone who is really trying to deploy something as a product had a really great foothold just to get started. And you're continuing that with like, you've got great documentation. In the online, I think you were definitely one of, if not the first, sort of online IDE that I saw. So before Arduino had an online IDE, you had one. Actually, I think that Pinocchio, where I was at the same time, before Hackster, might have had one as well. But like that was something that was fairly new in my perspective. But you had a library of code examples in there, like built into the IDE. That people could already draw from as well. So you're doing an incredible job on just developer education and stuff. And I wanted to pull up. Oh yeah. So I'm curious. This may be a little bit of a non sequitur, but you mentioned how a big part of telling the story is like, why does Particle exist? And at the start, at least, it was very much because like there isn't like an easy Arduino with Wi-Fi built in, and so it really surprised me in your announcement for the MSeries to read that like 25 or 75% of the people who order a Particle, you generally see like a 25% attach rate. So I'm assuming in this case that like customers is like businesses selling a Wi-Fi connected product?
Yeah. So the way I would think about this is like a company makes a Wi-Fi connected product. They ship 10,000 of them,
Uh-huh.
right, out to their customers. And most Wi-Fi stuff is smart home products, right? It's not. I think Wi-Fi is usually used in business. It's either smart home and it's used in people's houses,
Yeah.
or it's commercial and it's used in offices. The office stuff, this is where one of the things we've been surprised with cellular is most of that commercial stuff in offices ends up switching over to cellular at some point, because in an office environment, that network is managed by an IT team, and
Right.
they do not like this stuff. Right? They don't like this stuff because there are a lot of IoT products that are insecure. Now, ours is secure, but that IT team doesn't want to be separately evaluating the security of each individual IoT devices. So sometimes
Mhm.
they'll say like, yeah, this one looks good. But a lot of times they're like, I don't let anything like this on my network. And I don't care if yours is secure. Like, I've had too many bad experiences and I don't want to do that. And so a lot of those things end up on a cellular connection, because the easiest way to navigate the IT team is to say, I'm
Mm.
just not going to use your network. I'm just going to connect to the cellular network. And it actually does that there is a Wi-Fi network there. But coming back to smart home, um, a lot of those products, if you sort of think of what a classic smart home product is, many of them are things that do a job. I sort of think of this actually, generally speaking, with IoT. Most of the things we connect are existing machines or devices or something that like do a job that have a purpose, and they can do that thing offline. And then they get online to add some capability, remote diagnostics, monitoring, remote control, that kind of stuff. And so then the question is, what percentage of your customers are going to take the time to get it connected to their Wi-Fi network? And after you do that, what percentage of them are going to keep it connected if they move and they change their Wi-Fi password, or they get a new router or something like that, right? The result is that the minority of devices tend to be online. Most of those things either never get online in the first place or disconnect and are never, the connection is not reestablished. That's the primary reason that we see a lot of customers end up switching to cellular, because when you connect to a cellular network, the user isn't responsible for connecting it to the network. It just has to have an activated SIM and then connect to the tower. And so we get much higher rates of connectivity
Huh.
with cellular devices. But this is where multi-radio came from for us. We'd been exploring satellite and LoRaWAN, like kind of poking around at it, trying to figure out if there's something we should do. But we really need it in order to invest in something like this. We need a very clear customer problem. It needs to be obvious that there's something to do here. And in that case, it was, there are a certain set of customers that like, they need that thing online, because what it's doing is like monitoring a mission critical piece of equipment, or something where like that stream of data is very, very important and very
Mm.
valuable. And getting to like 85, 90, 95% connectivity, like that is not good enough. We need 100%. And those use cases, those customers tend to be like, they're doing something that matters, right? Like those aren't typically like smart toasters, those are like methane emissions monitoring systems, right? And like that shit matters. And so there is something about like the more we do to get to like that 100% connect everywhere, the more we get into like things that really we care about, right? That are impactful. And that's one of the fun and exciting things about this business. To your point, we started out with like an easy to use Wi-Fi connected Arduino. Last year, our customers saved reduced carbon emissions by 600 million metric tons, which is
Dang.
1/6 of the traffic of the Bay Area.
Wow. Nice.
That's cool, right?
That
And
is
it's all just a
awesome.
natural extension off of that like original thing. So
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we've got only a little time left. We're gonna go a little past 11, I think, just because we've got you and we started a little late. I'm gonna try and sort of breeze through these. Okay. So lightning round. Do you, as an IoT founder, do you have smart home devices in your home? Do you have them in your office? What do you use?
I do. I have a bunch of Ubiquiti stuff. I really like their stuff.
Ah.
The uh, I have invested in like the most over-engineered Wi-Fi network in my house. So I like all their stuff. I have like a home assistant set up, and I have a bunch of different like connected garage door. I have Lutron lights. I think are really good.
Ah.
And then I have a little like tablet set up with a little interface that sort of is like my smart home control center.
Cool. All right. So if someone comes to you and they're like, I want to build a hardware product, obviously they would probably tell you something more specific. But do you have like a general set of tips that you would give someone for building a hardware product with Particle?
I think my biggest tip, which is honestly my tip for this is just like good startup advice, right? And it doesn't have to be startup; it can be a big company too. But like maybe better is to say like new product development advice is like don't over-engineer the prototype. Like don't try to solve everything out of the gate. Just like get something out into somebody's hand, into a customer's hands. No product survives its first meeting with customers, and like the earlier you get somebody using your thing, the earlier you're going to get the feedback that is going to tell you what the product is actually supposed to be.
Love that. They will tell you what it's supposed to be. So with these new products, sorry, this is in front of your face, but we had a question from Stuart who was asking about pricing for NT and data. Let's talk about availability. This is going to be sort of a slow rollout. You're going to do some of them first, and I think satellite might be the last thing to come out of the gate here. So let's talk about when these things are going to be available and maybe a little bit about the pricing.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we have samples of the non-satellite stuff now. We'll have samples of the satellite stuff in the next couple months, and then that'll be shipping. We'll be shipping mass production for the non-satellite stuff in Q2, and then the satellite stuff in Q3. So the way we charge for our products is we have hardware devices that you buy, which we saw the pricing there, and then we have our cloud service, which is free for the first 100 devices, and then you have services you can sort of upgrade to that give you data operations, and data operations are basically the like currency that we provide for like what gets consumed when you send information, when you process it with our cloud services. So we haven't finalized the pricing of NTN, but basically what we're going to be doing is it will cost more data operations, probably like an order of magnitude more, or 2 orders of magnitude more than cellular. It is a much more expensive network, but there won't be like a separate fee associated with it. And so our customers, the sort of per device cost is like between $3 to $6 per device per month. Generally speaking, it's free for the first 100 units, and so we'll include some amount of free satellite with for sort of prototyping. And then after that, it's $3 to $6 per device per month. And basically, the way to think about it is if you're using it very sparingly, very infrequently, you could totally do it with the $3 per device per month. If you use it regularly, you're going to want to use the $6 per device per month. And we're going to build out the sort of way we charge to fit within that envelope.
Aha, excellent. Thank you. You're being a really good sport with me, like grilling you with these like very specific questions about the product and stuff. So thank you.
Totally.
2 more questions. What is your favorite part of the job? What really makes you like gets you going when you're doing this?
My favorite part of the job is like seeing what people do with our stuff. Cause like, I
Oh
don't
yeah.
know, like the cool part of, okay, everybody who works at Particle is this kind of nerd, right? We're all nerds, but like there's a lot of kinds of nerds, and many people at Particle, myself included, are like 5 kinds of nerds all wrapped into one. Everybody at Particle is a nerd for like interesting use cases. And I think that's
Mm.
important because the things that get done with our platform are often surprising. And like that can be frustrating if you think like, now I have to go learn about this whatever industry that I didn't know anything about before, and that's going to take time. But if you're naturally curious, you're like, oh cool, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like we're deployed in national parks, we're used for like vape detection in high school bathrooms.
Huh.
We're used to provide access control systems to fitness centers. We're used in we were like the launching pad for micromobility and like e-bikes and e-scooters, and like we were in that whole movement. And without realizing what was about to happen, right? We sort of like helped make that a thing. We're in Mamava, which is a like breastfeeding and nursing pods that are in airports that are sort of a secure environment. I went to the Phoenix Zoo with family and discovered a product there called Scooter Pals, which are these like little kind of like, they're like lion shaped. They look like giant stuffed animals that you like ride on, and they're like scooters that you ride around the zoo on. And every time you get off of it, you kind of have to like lock and unlock it because you're supposed to sort of protect your own vehicle, and like you don't want other people like hopping on yours and running it away. And that's all Particle. And like I don't know, I love that stuff. It's so cool to see what people do.
Awesome. Yes. I love the idea of the writable stuffy things. I did not know those even existed, and now I'm very excited. Okay,
Go hang out.
so
Phoenix Zoo is it's a good zoo, and also they're super fun.
man, I hope they clean them. Anyway, so finally, we have the question. I love to ask everybody this: what new or developing technology, anything that's like currently out, or something that like new out, or something on the horizon that isn't quite here yet, are you most excited about right now that has the chance to really upgrade your field or other fields that you're interested in? I'm sure you kind of live and breathe IoT, but I'm sure you have other interests as well. Like any new technologies that you're like, oh man, I can't wait for this to come out or get my hands on this.
I'll give you one that's I'll give you 2. I think one is, I do think satellite is really interesting. And I think of the radios that we're inserting into our product, I think satellite is the most fascinating, because I think that it has been the promise of like, there's just a network everywhere, always, right? Is like really cool. And also space is cool.
Yeah, space is cool.
Like in the list of things to be nerdy about, like we should all be nerdy about space, because space is cool. And I think that is, we've been keeping our eye on it for a long time, and it just like wasn't ready. The stuff that existed like it was too expensive or too hard to use, or like we just felt like if we gave it to customers, we didn't really think anybody was going to pick it up. And now it sort of has crossed some important milestone where I think it's ready now. But I also think it's just at the beginning of that, where I look at what happened with cellular when we launched cellular in 2015. We were some of the first people to like really take cellular IoT and like make it very accessible. And then that whole world has become much more accessible and approachable from then to now, the following 8 years. And that's going to happen with satellite. Like space is awesome. Yes. Like we're going to see that over the next few years. And so I'm excited to see that. And the other one I'll throw out, which is like, of course, this is what you say in 2024 is like, AI and generative AI and all that cool stuff. But I want to be specific about it because I think that
Hmm.
aside from the fact that like, you know, I used like my son and I used ChatGPT to make a coloring book of like all poop emoji themed coloring book, and like that was fun, right? So like it has such creative uses, which is really fun. I also think that there's a lot of untapped opportunity of like leveraging that to sort of learn things about the physical world. I think that there is. I heard a speaker a few years back who had written a book called Prediction Machines, which is sort of all about the like idea that AI and IoT are these complementary assets, where like once you make generating insights with an AI model cheap and accessible, then what you're hungry for is data to feed that model to
Hmm.
like train it about things. And so that makes IoT more valuable because
Hmm.
like IoT is a way to pull data from the physical world. And so there is all of this information that is like sits in every machine, no matter what the thing is, that is stuck inside that machine until it becomes an IoT device. And then all of a sudden you can like create a pipeline to collect data from that thing. And when people do that today, they do that in very specific ways. They're collecting like specific pieces of information to solve a very specific problem. Like it's a fire alarm and I want to know if there's a fire. And when there's a fire, I'm going to it's like a very short feedback loop of like, this is an important event and it's going to do this thing. But we haven't really
Hmm.
gotten into the world of like, I'm just going to pump all of the raw data out and then I'm going to pump it into a machine that's going to like tell me interesting things about what's going on with this thing, right? And I think that is how that AI world and the IT world are going to intersect, and that's a few years out probably, but like I'm excited about that because I do think there's a lot that can be done when these sort of two trends come together.
Yeah. Oh, and on that theme, so there's a lot of companies nowadays. You'll see like Reddit's planning on doing it. DocuSign is planning on doing it. I think particularly that's raising some concerns where they're planning on just mining all their customers' data for AI to train AI, or selling the data to train AI. My guess is that Particle wouldn't do that, but I'm curious, like, what would be what are your thoughts on that? Like, would Particle
The you know
ever?
the way we think about data is we've sort of got there's connectivity data which we see, right, which is like what's the state of connectivity of that particular device, and then there's like
Mhm.
customer data, the user device, which is that belongs to our customers. I think the way we think about that is we'd like to help solve customer problems for customers with their data, but that's an opt-in kind of a thing, right?
Mm.
Like that's a thing that if the customer wants us to help solve those problems, that's something you would opt into. With the connectivity stuff, like we already do a lot of analytics on connectivity data to be able to try and figure out like, I think we're better than most. We're often the ones that tell carriers when their networks are down because we have a really good set of tools. Like we have all of these cellular connected devices out there and they're connected in like a huge variety of environments that do a huge variety of things. And like
Mm.
we immediately see when there's like one tower down, we see it early. And we've got really good tools set up to like figure out which tower went down. And I think we're usually the ones telling the carriers which tower went down. And so that's all that's like pre-AI stuff, right? That's just like
Yeah.
well-designed algorithms that people have set up. But I do think that um, like we will be able to take that data set and turn it into, and be able to like better evaluate and understand like
Mm.
what are the root causes of networking issues that lead to these things falling offline, and what can we do to better resolve those or predict those, or things like that.
Wow, that gets really interesting in terms of like security, like national security stuff, where you see attacks occasionally on like cell towers and stuff, where people are afraid of like infrastructure getting attacked, and like it almost turns you into a part, like a piece of that national security puzzle, which is kind of amazing. I was not aware of that. Cool. So thank you so much for being such a good sport with all the grilling and stuff. I would love to go real quick through the links that we showed, some of the pages. So we've got Particle.io, obviously. Your
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, we've got the Particle social media feed. There's the official Particle blog post announcing the MSeries, which all of these links you can find in the description below. If you're watching this on
Mm-hmm.
video, there's this Spectra showcase where you introduced a lot of this tech. Hackster's article on this, also your Hackster community, tons of people posting really cool like LARP armor and stuff with and like tied in meteorological stations, pizza finders, anything that you could think of, honestly. And then your LinkedIn, where there's some interesting stuff. And then if anyone's interested in joining Particle, you think you fit that mold that we talked about, go check out the open positions and you can keep an eye on that. Thank you so much for joining us, Zach. It's been a true pleasure, and I'd love to hear more about stuff that you do in the future. Particle's just killing it. You're doing new stuff all the time. Like, it's impossible to keep up, and that is awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, Alex. Well, it was very, very much a pleasure to be here, and we definitely have more coming this year. In the past, we have done all these product announcements at Spectra, which we do once a year. And the reason that this product launch was done, we called it Spectra Showcase. So we basically took the like product announcement part of Spectra and like separated it and did it as a standalone thing. But it's not because we're not doing Spectra; it's because we have too much stuff we're working on. And so, in addition, like we will be doing another Spectra Showcase in the very near future, because we have the next set of cool stuff that that's coming right around the corner. And so, as that comes out, would love to
incredible.
Keep getting this stuff in front of you all. So we're working on a bunch of other cool stuff too.
That's a good problem to have. We have too much cool stuff to announce. We can't fit it all in one annual event. We had to make more. So
that's right. Too much cool stuff.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and sharing your questions and stuff. Be sure to follow for more hardware in your feed. Thanks again to Zach, and hack on.